Once upon a time, there was a little boy called Silly Billy. He was bouncing with excitement in the back seat of the car, his mismatched socks kicking the air as Mum turned onto the winding country lane. Dad hummed along to the radio, a pencil tucked behind his ear from fixing the garden shed that morning. Sulky the cat sat in his travel box, looking thoroughly unimpressed. "We're nearly there," Mum called, her green eyes sparkling in the rearview mirror. Silly Billy pressed his nose to the window. There it was, Gran and Grandad's cottage, nestled between hedgerows and wildflowers, with smoke curling from the chimney and a squeaky garden gate that always made Billy giggle. As the car pulled up, Gran appeared at the door, her floral blouse fluttering in the breeze and her spectacles sliding down her nose. Grandad followed, holding a mug of tea and a notebook full of curious facts. His jumper had elbow patches and his slippers squeaked as he walked. "Welcome, welcome." Gran beamed, arms wide for hugs. "We've got lemon drizzle cake and a new riddle waiting." Billy leapt out of the car, his shoes scuffed from last week's puddle-jumping adventure. He ran straight into Gran's hug, then twirled around Grandad's legs like a whirlwind. Sulky was released from his box and immediately found a sunny spot on the windowsill to glare at everyone. Inside the cottage, everything smelled like lavender and biscuits. The wallpaper was full of tiny flowers, and the kettle was already whistling. Billy's eyes sparkled as he spotted the biscuit tin, the one Gran always said was just in case. Mum settled into the armchair with a sigh of contentment, her messy bun flopping to one side. Dad wandered into the garden with Grandad, talking about birdhouses and jam jars. Billy sat at the kitchen table, swinging his legs and watching Gran pour tea into her best china cups. One had a tiny chip on the rim and a handle shaped like a curled ear. "That one's yours," Gran said with a wink. "It's got stories in it." Billy giggled and took the cup carefully. He stirred his tea with a little spoon, watching the ripples swirl. The handle pointed to the left. Suddenly, the room shimmered, the wallpaper faded. The biscuit tin vanished. Gran's apron turned into a frilly dress, and Grandad's slippers became shiny black shoes. Billy blinked. He was still in the kitchen, but everything looked different. The kettle was old and whistled like a train. The radio played scratchy music. Gran and Grandad looked younger, much younger. "Billy?" Gran said, her voice softer, her hair darker. "Are you all right, love?" Billy stared at his teacup. The handle had moved. He had stirred himself into the past. Silly Billy blinked again. The kitchen looked the same, but different. The wallpaper had faded roses instead of tiny daisies. The kettle on the stove was round and shiny, puffing steam like a little train. The biscuit tin was shaped like a red telephone box. And Gran, well, she wasn't quite Gran. She looked younger, with darker hair in a neat bun and no spectacles on her nose. "Are you all right, love?" she asked again, setting down a plate of jam tarts. Billy nodded slowly, clutching his teacup. The handle now pointed straight ahead. Grandad, or the younger version of him, walked in, whistling a tune. His beard was shorter, and his jumper didn't have any elbow patches yet. He carried a wooden toy plane and a screwdriver. "Finished fixing the wings," he said proudly, holding it up. "Now it'll fly straight as a crow." Billy's mouth dropped open. You're young." Grandad chuckled. "Well, I'm not that old." Billy looked around. Everything felt like a dream. The clock on the wall ticked with a loud tark. The radio played a jolly tune with lots of crackles. Even Sulky the cat looked different, smaller, fluffier, and slightly less grumpy. "Would you like a jam tart?" Gran asked, placing the plate in front of him. "They are still warm." Billy nodded, taking one carefully. It was sticky and sweet and tasted like summer. He glanced at the teacup. The handle had shifted again, now pointing to the right. He gave it a tiny stir. The room shimmered. The wallpaper changed again, this time to bright yellow with bouncing bunnies. The kettle turned into a sleek silver one with buttons. Gran's hair was white again, and her spectacles had returned. Grandad's beard was full and fluffy, and his slippers squeaked as he walked. Billy gasped. He was back. Gran blinked. You all right, Billy? You went a bit quiet. Billy looked at his teacup. I think it's magic. Grandad raised an eyebrow. Magic, is it? What kind of magic? Billy grinned. Time travel magic. I stirred it, and I saw you when you were young. You had a toy plane and no elbow patches. Gran and Grandad exchanged a look, the kind grown-ups do when they're not sure whether to laugh or be amazed. Well, Gran said slowly, that teacup has been in the family a long time. Grandad nodded. And it does have a curious handle. Billy's eyes sparkled. Can I try again? Gran smiled. Only if you finish your tart first. Billy gobbled the last bite, then gently stirred the tea again, this time with the handle pointing straight up. The room shimmered once more. And just like that, silly Billy was off on another adventure, through time, with nothing but a teacup and a very sticky smile. Silly Billy was holding tightly to his teacup as the room shimmered and swirled. The handle had pointed straight up, and that, he was beginning to learn, meant forward. The kitchen around him blinked and buzzed, the wallpaper turned into soft glowing panels that changed color like jellyfish. The kettle floated above the counter, humming gently. The biscuit tin hovered in mid-air, spinning slowly, and opened with a cheerful ding, to reveal a tray of perfectly stacked custard creams. Billy's eyes grew wide. Whoa! Gran walked in, but she looked older than before. Her hair was silver and tied in a bun with sparkly pins. Her cardigan had tiny lights stitched into the sleeves, and her spectacles had vanished, replaced by a twinkly brooch that blinked when she smiled. Well, hello there, she said, her voice still warm and familiar. You must be Billy. Billy blinked. I am Billy. Gran chuckled. Yes, but you're little Billy. Our Billy's all grown up now. Billy's mouth dropped open. Grown up. Grandad shuffled in, his beard longer and fluffier than ever. He wore a jumper with buttons that played music and slippers that glided across the floor like skates. Did someone say biscuits? He asked, reaching for the floating tin. Billy stared at them both. Is this the future? Gran nodded. Just a little peek. You stirred your tea the clever way. Billy looked down at his teacup. The tea was still swirling, and the handle now pointed slightly to the right. Where's Mum and Dad? He asked. Gran smiled. They're in the garden, with grown-up Billy and his little boy. Billy's eyes sparkled. I have a boy. Grandad winked. He's just as silly as you. Billy jumped off the chair and ran to the back door. The garden was bigger, with glowing flowers and a swing that moved on its own. Mum was there, her hair streaked with silver, still tied in a messy bun. She wore a jumper with tiny stars on it and was laughing as she chased a giggling child. Dad was nearby, building something that looked like a birdhouse crossed with a rocket. He still had a pencil behind his ear and a tea towel over his shoulder. Billy watched in amazement. That's me, but older. The little boy on the swing turned and waved. He had tousled light brown hair, mismatched socks, and a cheeky grin. Billy waved back, his heart full of wonder. Then he felt a tug, gentle but firm. The teacup in his hand was glowing softly, and the handle had shifted again. Gran appeared beside him. Time to go back, love. You've seen enough for one stir. Billy nodded slowly. Will I remember? Gran smiled. Only the best bits. Billy gave the tea one last stir. The garden shimmered. The swing faded. The glowing flowers blinked goodbye. And just like that, silly Billy was back in the cozy kitchen, the wallpaper full of daisies, the kettle whistling, and Gran offering another jam tart. Silly Billy was sitting at Gran's kitchen table, staring at his teacup like it held all the secrets of the universe. The handle had shifted again, this time pointing to the left. Billy gave it a gentle stir. The room shimmered. The wallpaper faded to soft pink roses. The kettle turned into a squat little pot with a knitted cozy. The biscuit tin was shaped like a cottage, and the radio played a cheerful tune with lots of crackles. Gran looked younger again, her hair darker, her cardigan buttoned all the way up. Grandad's beard was shorter, and his jumper had no music buttons, just a patch of flour from baking. Billy blinked. "Where am I now?" Gran smiled. "Why don't you take a peek outside?" Billy tiptoed to the back door and opened it slowly. The garden was full of daisies and dandelions. A washing line flapped gently in the breeze, and a little girl was playing with a skipping rope near the apple tree. She had shoulder-length light brown hair in a messy ponytail, soft green eyes, and a giggle that sounded like sunshine. Billy gasped. "Mum." The little girl turned and waved. "Hello." Billy waved back, his heart thumping. "You're my mum." She tilted her head. "I'm a mum." "Not yet," Billy said, stepping into the garden. "But you will be. You'll be my mum." The little girl laughed and skipped over. "That's silly." Billy grinned. "I am silly Billy." They played together under the apple tree, tossing daisies into the air and pretending they were snowflakes. Mum showed him her favorite hiding spot, behind the compost bin, and Billy showed her how to make a daisy crown. Grandad came out with a tray of squash and biscuits. "Don't forget to hydrate, explorers." Gran followed with a camera, the old kind with a click and a flash. "Smile." Billy and little Mum posed with their daisy crowns, giggling. Billy looked around. Everything felt soft and golden, like a memory wrapped in sunshine. Then he felt the tug again. The teacup in his hand shimmered. The handle had shifted slightly to the right. Gran appeared beside him, her younger face kind and knowing. "Time to go, love." Billy nodded. "I liked seeing Mum as a little girl." Gran smiled. She was always full of wonder. Billy gave the tea one last stir. The garden shimmered. The daisies faded, the skipping rope vanished. And just like that, silly Billy was back in the present, sitting at the kitchen table, his teacup still warm, and Mum walking in with a smile. "Everything all right?" she asked, brushing a crumb from his cheek. Billy nodded slowly. "You were very good at skipping." Mum blinked. "Pardon?" Billy just smiled. Silly Billy was gripping his teacup with both hands, staring at the swirling tea as the room shimmered once again. This time, the handle had pointed downward. The kitchen blinked into a dim, flickering space. The wallpaper was faded and peeling, the kettle was a heavy iron pot hanging over a small fire, and the biscuit tin was nowhere to be seen. Rain tapped against the window panes, and the room smelled of damp socks and cabbage. Billy looked around nervously. "Hello?" A woman in a long dress bustled in, carrying a tray of boiled potatoes. Her hair was tied in a tight bun, and she wore a serious expression. "You're not one of mine," she said, peering at Billy. "Where's your cap?" Billy blinked. "My what?" She frowned. "All boys wear caps. And boots. And manners." Billy gulped. "I think I'm in the wrong time." He turned to the table. His teacup was still there, chipped and heavy, with a handle shaped like a curled ear. He gave it a stir. Nothing happened. The woman handed him a spoon. "Use the proper one." Billy stirred again, slowly, carefully. Still nothing. The room stayed gloomy. The fire crackled. A cat that looked suspiciously like Sulky padded in, soaking wet and even grumpier than usual. Billy looked around. "I need to go back." He tried stirring faster. Then slower. Then in tiny circles. The handle wobbled but didn't shift. The woman raised an eyebrow. "You're a very silly boy." Billy nodded. "I am silly Billy." She sighed and handed him a biscuit, plain, hard, and shaped like a brick. "Eat something. It helps the thinking." Billy nibbled the biscuit and stared at the teacup. He remembered Gran's words, "Only the best bits." He closed his eyes and thought of jam tarts. Of Mum's messy bun. Of Dad's laugh. Of Grandad's squeaky slippers. Of Gran's biscuit tin and warm hugs. He opened his eyes and gently turned the handle, just a little, just enough. The room shimmered. The fire faded. The wallpaper brightened. The kettle whistled. The biscuit tin dinged. Billy was back. Gran was standing nearby, her spectacles sliding down her nose. "You went quiet again." Billy nodded, clutching his teacup. "I nearly got stuck in the soggy century." Grandad chuckled. "That's what happens when you stir downward. Always a bit gloomy down there." Mum walked in with a fresh plate of jam tarts. "Everything all right?" Billy smiled. "I think I'll stay in this time for a bit." Sulky jumped onto the windowsill, shook off a few raindrops, and gave Billy a look that said, "Don't do that again." Billy giggled and took a tart. The teacup sat quietly on the table, its handle pointing gently to the east. Silly Billy was tiptoeing through Gran and Grandad's garden, holding his teacup carefully as the handle pointed left, just a little. He gave it a gentle stir. The garden shimmered. The apple tree shrank. The flower beds turned into rows of vegetables. The swing disappeared, replaced by a wooden plank tied with rope. The shed at the end of the garden looked newer, freshly painted, with a crooked sign above the door that read, "Grandad's Shed of Wonders." Billy crept closer. Inside the shed, everything smelled of sawdust and string. Shelves were stacked with jam jars full of buttons, springs, and marbles. A magnifying glass hung from a hook, and a half-built contraption sat on the workbench, something with wheels, feathers, and a spoon. A boy stood nearby, fiddling with a screwdriver. He had wispy blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a jumper 2 sizes too big. Billy gasped. "Grandad!" The boy turned. "I'm not a grandad." Billy grinned. "Not yet." The boy raised an eyebrow. "You're a bit odd." Billy nodded proudly. "I'm Silly Billy." The boy smiled. "Well, I'm just Billy." Billy's eyes widened. "We have the same name." Young Grandad laughed. "Must be a good one." They spent the afternoon tinkering. Young Grandad showed Billy how to build a marble maze using cardboard tubes and sticky tape. Billy showed him how to make a paper aeroplane that looped in circles. They giggled and built and made a mess. At one point, Sulky the cat wandered in, younger, fluffier, and slightly less grumpy. He sniffed a jar of feathers and sneezed. Billy looked around. "This shed is amazing." Young Grandad nodded. "It's where I keep my best ideas." Billy spotted a notebook on the shelf. Inside were sketches of inventions, a biscuit launcher, a sock sorter, and something called the teacup twister. Billy's heart skipped. "Did you invent the time teacup?" Young Grandad shrugged. "I had the idea once. But I never got it to work." Billy held up his cup. "It does work." Young Grandad stared. "Really?" Billy nodded. "I've seen Mum as a little girl. And you as a grown-up. And even the soggy century." Young Grandad grinned. "Then maybe it was one of my best ideas." Billy smiled. "It's brilliant." Then he felt the tug again. The teacup shimmered. The handle had shifted slightly to the right. Young Grandad handed Billy a feather. "Take this. It's from my biscuit launcher." Billy tucked it into his pocket and gave the tea one last stir. The shed shimmered. The cardboard tubes faded. The crooked sign vanished. And just like that, Silly Billy was back in the present, standing in Grandad's shed, now older and filled with even more wonders. Grandad walked in, slippers squeaking. "Been exploring?" Billy nodded. "You were very clever." Grandad chuckled. "Still am, on good days." Billy pulled out the feather. "I brought this back." Grandad's eyes twinkled. "Well now, that's a curious thing." Silly Billy was sitting at the kitchen table, cheeks full of jam tart and eyes full of secrets. The teacup sat quietly in front of him, its handle pointing gently to the side. Gran was knitting a jumper with a hidden pocket. Grandad was scribbling in his notebook, slippers squeaking as he shuffled to the kettle. Sulky the cat was curled on the windowsill, tail flicking with mild disapproval. Mum walked in, brushing crumbs off her jumper. Dad followed, pencil still tucked behind his ear and a tea towel slung over one shoulder. Billy's been very quiet, Mum said, raising an eyebrow. Too quiet, Dad added with a grin. That usually means something's brewing. Billy sat up straight. I have something to tell you. Everyone paused. I've been time traveling, Billy said proudly. With my teacup. Mum blinked. Your teacup? Dad chuckled. Well, that's new. Gran looked over her spectacles. He's not wrong. Grandad nodded. It's a very clever cup. Billy explained everything, the shimmer, the swirling tea, the handle directions. He told them about visiting Mum as a little girl, meeting Grandad when he was just Billy, and even seeing the future with glowing biscuit tins and a swing that moved on its own. Mum sat down slowly. You saw me as a child. Billy nodded. You were brilliant at skipping. Dad leaned on the counter. And me. You were building a rocket birdhouse, Billy said. And you still had a pencil behind your ear. Dad laughed. Sounds about right. Gran poured more tea. It's been in the family a long time. But it only works for those with a curious heart. Grandad added, and mismatched socks. Billy wiggled his feet, left red, right blue. Mum smiled. So what happens next? Billy looked at the teacup. I think I want to show you. He stirred the tea gently, the handle pointing up. The room shimmered. Everyone blinked. The wallpaper glued softly. The kettle floated. The biscuit tin dinged. Gran's cardigan sparkled, and Grandad's slippers glided. Mum gasped. Is this? Dad stared. The future. Billy nodded. Just a peek. They all stood together, looking around in wonder. Sulky floated past on a cushion, still unimpressed. Mum held Billy's hand. It's beautiful, Dad smiled. And still full of biscuits. Gran winked. Some things never change. Billy felt the tug again. The teacup shimmered. The handle shifted. He stirred once more. The room blinked back to normal, daisies on the wallpaper, kettle whistling, and Sulky back on the windowsill with a huff. Everyone sat quietly for a moment. Then Dad said, I think we need more jam tarts. Mum nodded. And maybe a story. Billy grinned. I've got lots. Gran handed him a fresh tart. Start from the beginning. Billy took a bite, crumbs falling like confetti. And so he did, and after a day full of jam tarts, giggles, and time-traveling tea, silly Billy was finally feeling sleepy. The cottage was quiet now. The kettle had stopped whistling. The biscuit tin was closed. Sulky the cat was curled in a tight ball on the windowsill, tail twitching in dreams. Gran tucked a blanket around Billy's shoulders as he snuggled into the big armchair. Mum sat nearby, brushing his hair gently with her fingers. Dad was reading aloud from Grandad's notebook, a story about a sock-powered rocket and a marmalade moon. Billy's teacup sat on the table beside him, its handle resting in the middle, not pointing anywhere at all. I think I'll leave it there, Billy whispered, eyes half closed. Just for tonight. Gran smiled. That's a wise choice, love. Grandad nodded. Even adventurers need rest. Mum kissed Billy's forehead. You've had quite a day. Billy yawned. I saw you skipping. And Dad building. And me with my own little boy. Dad chuckled. Sounds like a very silly future. Billy smiled sleepily. The best kind. Outside, the stars twinkled softly. The garden was still, the swing creaked gently in the breeze. Inside, the cottage glowed with warmth, the kind that comes from stories shared, biscuits eaten, and time spent together. Billy's eyes fluttered shut. And as he drifted off to sleep, the teacup shimmered, just a little, as if it, too, was dreaming. Of past and future. Of jam and rockets. Of a little boy called Silly Billy,